Welcome to the Inland Valley Storytellers Monthly Story Swap. My name is John St. Clair, and I'm your Zoom host and also the leader of this group. And we have a small group tonight, but I think we're going to have a good time anyway. And the room here is way different, And I think I'm going to pick up the computer to kind of show, because it's very interesting. So here we have the people in attendance, and they built these structures. Is it showing?
Yeah, no.
Yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, because the lights are.
Right, the lights are facing away from the structures, so that
Yeah.
it's picking up the end. There it is. It started because you.
Yeah, and this part where we usually tell the stories is not a big enough space anymore, because it's got this big structure in the middle. And as you walk in, so it's about a architect, I guess. Foster Rhodes Jackson. Okay. Now that's been recorded. I should show up nice and bright on the screen for Zoom people, because the lights are on me. And I think I'm going to go ahead and tell the first story.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right, this is a story from Brazil. And it's a story that explains why there is misery in the world. Long time ago, there lived an old woman. And she lived in a small house quite comfortably. And the house was nothing exceptional, but she had an exceptional pear tree in the front yard. And this tree produced wonderful pears every year. But as she grew older, she had a harder time harvesting them. The tree kept getting bigger and bigger, and the best pears were always up in the upper part of the tree. And she got to where she couldn't harvest them anymore. She could get the low-hanging fruit. But as the tree grew, that grew less also. And so she had to wait till the pears dropped to the ground, and then they were slightly bruised. But she could still eat them. Well, after a couple of years of not really being able to harvest the pears, the neighborhood kids noticed. And so one day she heard some noise out in the front yard, and the kids had climbed up into the tree and they were eating her pears. And so she went out and yelled at them to get down out of her tree, which they didn't. They called her names, they made fun of her, and they named her. They named her Old Aunt Misery. And that name, after a while, began to stick, and other people called her Aunt Misery or Old Aunt Misery. And this went on for several years. And one day, a poor traveler came to her door, and it was night, and he asked if he could have a place to sleep. And she invited him in and gave him a place to sleep on the floor in her small house. And in the morning, she made him coffee and fed him breakfast. And when he finished, he said, "You have been so kind to me. I would like to repay your kindness. If you make a wish, I can make it come true. What would you like to wish?" And Old Aunt Misery thought for a while. Then she said, "I would like to have the power to prevent people who climb up in my tree, prevent them from getting back down, unless I give them permission to come down." And the traveler said, "It is done." So it wasn't too long, several months later, the pears in her tree were ripening, and the children in the neighborhood were up in her tree, eating her pears and laughing, and she came out and they yelled, "Oh, there's old Aunt Misery. You come to yell at us again? Ha ha ha." And they were laughing. And she didn't say anything this time. And then they ate their fill and filled their pockets. And when they tried to climb down, they couldn't. They were stuck in the tree. And this time it was her that was laughing. And their taunts and slander turned to begging and pleading. "Help us get down out of this tree. We don't want to be stuck here." And she let them do that for quite a while. And then she said, "I will let you down out of that tree if you promise to never, ever climb up into my pear tree again. Never come back here and do that." And of course, they were very willing to make that promise, and they kept it. They never went back to the pear tree. So that lasted for a few years, and she still had to pick up fruit off the ground because she couldn't climb up the tree. But you know, it would bruise where it hit the ground, but she could cut off the bruise, and the pears were good otherwise. She got to eat plenty of pears, and they weren't, their tree was not being stripped by the neighbor children. Well, one day, a woman dressed in all black came to visit her. And the woman said, "I am Death, and I have come to take you. It is your time." Now, old Aunt Misery didn't want to go. She was still, I mean, she was kind of physically feeble, but she still enjoyed being alive, and she wasn't ready to end her life. And so she said, "I understand, Death, that it is my time, but I have one last wish. I'd like to have a last meal of pears from the top of my tree, because they are so good, and I never get them until after they've fallen on the ground. Could you pick 2 pears for me and let me have a final meal before my life ends here on earth?" And so Death agreed and climbed way up in the tree and picked 2 pears and went to climb down, but couldn't. The spell of this traveler was more powerful than Death itself, and Death was stuck in that tree. So old Aunt Misery felt like as long as Death was stuck up there, she could go on living. And so she let Death stay stuck up there. But this caused problems for other people that she didn't think about. First of all, hospitals began to fill up, and rest homes began to fill up, and nobody was dying. And some people who depended on Death for their livelihood, like grave diggers and morticians, they were suffering because they had no income. Nobody was dying. And so finally, she could see that this was causing problems. So she said, "Death, I am going to make you a deal. I'll let you come down if you promise never come back here again to take me." And Death was tired of being in that pear tree and decided to go ahead and make the deal. And she came down and she left. And that is why Misery is still with us, because Death will never come to get Misery.
That's great. What is the contract?
From Dan Ketty.
Oh.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, now we understand.
And did he say it was from Brazil?
Yeah, Brazil. And he said, you know, he often has comments at the bottom. I think this was from Elder Tales. And he said there are many tales about fooling Death, you know, in lots of different cultures. And he thought it was particularly interesting that this Brazilian version had Death as a female, because usually Death is a man. Not that it really matters, but
It was the only time you said she was at the very end.
No, you mentioned that.
that it was a woman.
Oh.
I said a woman dressed in black.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I missed that part. Yeah, that is it.
But there's a different version, a similar story that uses a lot of the same bits that I think Richard Chase collected. Um, Weirdly enough, I was thinking of telling that for Celebration because it's a cool story that I used to tell and haven't done in ages.
Oh,
Right. But this was a secret from Chris.
yeah. When I was in college at Pomona College, Richard Chase was having gatherings. And we would do folk dances and he'd tell stories. And I went to those meetings. It was very interesting. And Chris hired him to come to her class once and tell stories.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, this was back in the late 60s, early 70s. Never heard of Richard Chase. He's published some books.
Yes. Great, great story catcher. He put together several different collections that a lot of people use. I think one of them was a whole bunch of the Jack Tales. And there was another collection that I ran across. But yeah, he was a great collector of stories.
Okay, anybody else have a story?
Sure. But it's not going to be that one.
Okay, yeah. And we still just have Chris.
All right, well, I've got to tell something for the season because Halloween is next week. And this is a traditional story from Japan. And one of the things that made me think of it is that Michael McCarty and I told different stories with the same title years ago. And he would tell the American one, and I would tell the Japanese one. And I'll tell you the name of the story afterwards. Taro and Jiro were friends since their childhood. And they spent as much of their free time together as they could because they enjoyed most of the same things in life. They were living near a small village and both of them worked for farmers, but they both wanted to do something more, to have enough money to do something more with their lives. And there was no way to do it working for farmers who could barely afford to pay them. And so one day they decided both to go to the nearest big city, someplace where they would both have the opportunity to find jobs that they could use to make money rather than to be paid half in vegetables. And so they both did. It was a walk that took days, but it was worth it because there was a big city there and many opportunities. And both of them used their opportunities to make money. They both worked very hard. But Taro and Jiro learned that in that environment, they were more different than alike. Because Taro, he saved every penny that he could out of money. He wanted to have money to go home and buy land and build something of his own. And Jiro, he wanted to enjoy the money as he made it. And so he spent most of the money that he made, and then more than that. And then he spent more than he made. He spent it on the finest sake he could find. He spent it on entertaining people in the taverns and losing money at the dice games. And so finally, when it was time for them to go home, one friend had money and the other had empty pockets. And so they went home. But they spent time talking about what they had done. And the one who had the empty pockets, he bragged that he had made money, and he had. He just spent it all, or lost it all, or wasted it all. And the one who still had money said, yes, I've saved enough to buy land and do something. And his friend, the one who had no money, became jealous. And on the way home, he did the most terrible thing that a friend could do. He killed his lifelong friend and stole the money so that he would have something of his own. And he realized, well, now I don't have to go back and be poor there. I can go back to the big city again and use this money to do something there. And he went back to the city. And once again, he wasted the money that he had killed his friend for. So that he was not only broke for the second time, but he still had the weight of the guilt on his shoulders. He had killed his friend and not even profited by it. Well, he went back again to the small village. But on the way back, perhaps it was his guilt that made him stop, because he was near the place where he had killed his friend. And he stopped and looked around as if to memorize that place. And as he started walking again, he heard a voice. Giro. Who was there? He didn't see anyone. Giro. Come, pick me up where you left me. And he followed the sound of the voice, and he realized that he had never done much of anything with his friend's body, just covered it up. And now there was a skeleton there. And the skeleton turned his head toward him and said, Giro, are you on your way home with success? And Giro said, no. I even wasted the money that I killed you for. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do. I've done terribly wrong. And I still have nothing. I can help you with that at least. You can help me with the money. Yes, yes. After all, we can perform together. Do you remember how you used to play music? And Jiro said, well, yes. Fine, fine. You do that, and I will dance, and people will be amazed and give you coins. Well, yes, I guess I can do that. And so he picked his friend's skeleton up very carefully and wrapped it and carried it with him. And he had enough coins to buy a small flute, one made of bamboo. And he remembered how to play that. But when he got back to the village, he said, I have the most amazing thing to show you. And he set up in the village square and he began to play the flute. And the skeleton unwrapped itself and began to dance. And people were astonished and said, that's amazing. How have you done this? I'm traveling and entertaining now. And so they gave him what coins they could, food and drink. But of course he had to travel because there wasn't much to do in that one small village. And he went from village to village and town to town and finally to bigger cities. And as he reached the big city once more, the one that he and his friend had gone to, he received a request from one of the nobles. This was the magistrate for that entire district, and he dared not turn down such a request. The request was to come and perform for the magistrate. And if he could do what people were saying, he would be rewarded richly. Well, rewarded richly is the kind of thing you like to hear. And so he very carefully took the skeleton and its flute to where the magistrate was. And the magistrate was there, but not alone. The members of the local samurai community were there with him. They wanted to see this performance they'd been hearing about, because mostly he'd been performing for the people, the workers, the people he was comfortable with. Now with a room full, mainly of samurai, the ones, authorized to walk around armed, that was a bit scary. And the magistrate said, now, perform these miracles for us that we've been hearing about. And so he unwrapped the skeleton, pulled out his flute, and began to play. And the skeleton stayed where it was. And he began to play again. And the skeleton did not move. And he went over and said, Taro, please, you must dance. This is important. We have an audience here of the finest people, including the magistrate. And it was then that the skeleton moved. And he stood up. And he bowed low before the magistrate. And he said, I was brought here to dance. But instead, I must consult you in your capacity as a magistrate. This man and I were friends since childhood. We both came to this city before to seek our fortunes. We did well, but on our way back to our home village, he murdered me for my money. Then, when he came by another time, I offered to help him make money by dancing to his flute. I did this so that one day I hoped I would be able to present my case. And I ask you, as the victim, should I not be heard by your court? And the magistrate was stunned because he had never heard a murder case presented by the victim before. And the magistrate said, present your case. And he did. And he told the story of how he was murdered and how he was brought back to life to help his friends make money again in order to receive justice. And Jiro was shocked, but he could not deny the things that he had done. And so it was that the magistrate said, I find you guilty of the most horrific crimes, of robbing and killing your lifelong friend. And so he gestured to one of the samurai there. Now you may not know, but in those days there were samurai who had a specific job, and that was to act as executioners. Mm-hmm. And their swords were slightly heavier than the ones you normally see samurai carry, because they must be able to swiftly and easily cut through the neck of someone to be beheaded. And so it was that Jiro was led over to the block where he would rest his head. And the sword came down swiftly, and he was no more. At that, the skeleton said to the magistrate, justice is served, and I thank you. And he lay down and spoke no more and danced no more. And that is the story of the dancing skeleton, as it is heard in Japan.
Great. So Michael told a similar story, it was an American version?
There is a dancing skeleton version that both he and I encountered, and he does a great version of it. But it's a totally different story.
Yeah,
And it's again about a skeleton who just doesn't want to be buried in a grave.
I
So
think
that,
I've heard that
Yeah.
story.
but that's the one with I don't remember whether he tells the version with the rocking chair in it or just the dancing. But it's a wonderful story, and I think that was in one of the Chase collections. But we found different versions of it and told different versions of it back then. And then I ran across this other one, and I love it.
That's great. You have a story? You have a story? Okay. It was a short meeting. I want to make an announcement. Next month, our story swap is the week of Celebration Week.
Yes, the Monday
Before.
before the celebration. Right?
Yeah. And my brother is going to be visiting from Denver. And depending on how he feels after a day of visiting the living desert out in Palm Desert or wherever it is, if he's feeling up to it, he may come to the storytelling meeting.
Good.
Nice.
And he is a trained public speaker. He got a PhD in public rhetoric from UCLA.
Oh,
He was part of Redlands College. It wasn't University of Redlands back then. Redlands College debate team. And they had a very good debate team. He wasn't the top debater, but he was on the debate team. And Redlands won several national championships, but not while he was there. But they always had a competitive debate team. And then he taught in Pennsylvania at Shippensburg State College, and he ran the tournament speech program. And he had debate squads of students doing debating, and he taught there for 40 years. Now he lives in Denver. He's 9 years older than me, so he's 85.
wow.
And
So what school was it that he was a professor?
Shippensburg State College in Pennsylvania. It's in south central Pennsylvania.
Interesting.
Yeah. So hopefully if we can get back in time that he can take a nap,
Yeah.
then he'd probably come. If not, he may not feel up to going out at night.
What a great time to have together in the desert.
Yeah. And when I was preparing to give the hour-long presentation at the Southern California Story Swap Festival, I practiced it in Denver to a group of people. He lives in a senior apartment building, and he leads a weekly discussion group. And so he gave his weekly discussion group time to me. And I had an audience of about 30 people who listened to my story. So I got to practice the whole thing and see how the timing went.
Good.
So as the flyer shows, here we go. Michael McCarty and Antonio Sacre are going to be guest tellers at our celebration. And we have the luxury with 5 storytellers, we can tell stories a little bit longer if you want to.
Okay.
I haven't decided what story I'll tell, but I'm excited for a good evening of stories.
I think you did a fabulous job.
This is going to be great. Those are 2 of my favorite storytellers
I know.
anyway.
I know.
But both of them told at my library, I believe, because Antonio had the Barking Mouse out.
Yeah.
I think we had something for that book. And Michael, of course, told at our library years ago. And he was part of St. Gabriel Storytellers when he was first getting started with storytelling.
Yeah. And they've both been guest tellers for us before. most recently was Antonio at the Folk Music Center. Michael was way back when we were meeting, in Pomona at the Cal Poly Satellite. I don't know if you were with the group then, this was great.
Oh, that was the one we didn't really meet there regularly, I thought. With the
We had 2 celebrations there.
Yeah, yeah, because that was when, what was her name?
Sandra Posey.
Sandra.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sandra Posey.
she was at the school there, and she got us the use of that facility.
Yeah.
What? What?
So Cal Poly had a satellite campus in the old mall,
Oh.
you know, where Sears and all those stores were. They had a satellite campus there, and it was a little theater.
Mhm.
It was a nice venue.
Oh, yeah.
I think we were there for 2 celebrations. You weren't in the group then.
I guess not.
Yeah, there was a whole little arts district there in downtown Pomona that was centered around that old shopping center. And there was, weirdly enough, I slightly knew the owner of one of the places there because he had this used bookstore in that area.
It's still there?
No,
There's a bookstore.
there was, he and his wife were in the little bookstore, and there was a weird thing. He actually was unfortunately murdered by this teenager that there was, the whole thing was very weird. The guy had mental problems, and the whole thing was really strange. And the wife, who was the older of the 2, tried to keep the store open for a while, but she just really couldn't because she had been trying to retire out of doing it anyway. So the friends of the store did what they could to help her sell off the merchandise. But he had been part of the science fiction community for years, and so he used to sell at science fiction conventions as well as have a store that kept.
The store that's there now, he specializes in science fiction and he pays kids to go to the events, he pays their way. And to get them signed and bring them.
And so he may have been one of the buyers or stuff from the older show.
Yeah, he must have.
So I have one announcement to make, and that is last week I got an email from Timpano's Storytelling Festival. They have available the virtual version of the festival, which you can buy and watch at your convenience. You have like 2 months to watch it.
How expensive.
I don't remember the price. If you're interested, I could send a copy of that email I could forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Because there were a lot of good storytellers there.
Mhm.
They have really, yeah, they're like one of the best now, with OHI's.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Sears storytelling, I don't even know, I don't get their information anymore.
Well, one of the ones in the Sierra area closed down, so there used to be 2 up there.
There was 6.
Well, there used to be the Mariposa one.
Right.
I don't think they ever started back up.
Mariposa's not.
Yeah.
And then the Steve Sanfeld had his, he retired, and then they brought it back the following year. So, like, there was 1 year where it missed and it came back, but
Yeah.
the story, the people that were running it were the ones that were hoping to Steve.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Do you have any announcements, Nick?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the thing about San Diego's celebrations a week before ours. And so, and they're doing a daytime on the 15th. So I'm considering taking the train down there because it's a very nice ride. But they have a theme because there's in a church in Ocean Beach. And so they wanted to do a theme of water-related stories or something like that. And so that's going to be kind of a fun thing. I'm involved with storytelling stuff at the science fiction convention the week after our celebration. And that's going to be down near LAX. And I don't know if you know Todd Gallaglass, but he's an author and storyteller. I think he goes back to telling the old Ren Fair days and things like that. But he's going to be there. And it's just a fun convention. But one of my favorite authors is going to be the main author guest of honor. And imagine someone who does children's books under her own name and teen and adult books under this odd pseudonym. And her adult books are frequently interwoven retellings of folk tales or fairy tales or really old stories, like late 19th century things. Like she had one, you know, those stories from the early 20th century that were about these non-existent countries in Europe and weird customs that would be woven into some, like Prisoner of Zenda or things like that, made into movies. Imagine something like that interwoven with Fall of the House of Usher.
Oh, yeah.
And the stories in that series are brilliantly weird because she had such a strange mind. I've actually got one of the books with me. I can show you what I'm talking about. This one is What Stalks the Deep. And this is the third in the series of the ones that included that Fall of the House of Usher thing. And this is about a country where part of women's liberation came out of a linguistic argument because the language was so complex that it had pronouns for men, women, soldiers, priests, and rocks that were all completely different. And all the laws were based on assumptions about what people were. And finally, after they lost a bunch of men in one of the wars, one of the women said, so if I become a soldier, my pronoun changes, and the restrictions on the woman who being in the army go away, right?
Oh,
It's like,
yeah.
wait, what? No, that's not how it's supposed to work. Well, it says right there in our own dictionaries, it's like,
Yeah.
well, but, and suddenly there became this tradition of women entering the military because they're sworn soldiers and that the pronouns fit and everything. They're not women anymore legally. They're sworn soldiers who happen to have started out as women.
I don't think Pete Hegseth would like that.
Yeah,
But it's just, her mind is just that way on the stories that she tells that are these interwoven, bizarre stories.
Yeah, I love it.
And this one, or one of the others that I read was, she got the idea for the story from, I think, like an 1890 story by Arthur Machen. And it's like, what? Because he has a very famous book, and it's not that. She found an obscure book that he had written and got an inspiration from a line in that book to write a whole novel based on this really weird retelling of an 1890 pulp horror story. So she just has that kind of a mind, and that's the writer gets the honor for this. But anyway, T. Kingfisher is how she signs her name on her adult
yes,
and teen books.
it's pronoun, but you can't tell.
Right, and that's the kind of thing she does. Well, but here's your picture,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and I think she slightly resembles the sworn soldier character from the start.
Okay, well, I think I'm gonna end the Zoom session. And we do have refreshments, thanks to Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it.
All right, where's the recording thing?
It was really getting here because too much train traffic.
There it is.
Yes, well, because,
Stop it all the tracks.
well, because Metrolink shares tracks with the freight lines. There was